There we go. So today's session is all about using Solibri Anywhere and how we collaborate with others using the Anywhere product. We're actually going to talk a little bit about Office and what has to be done to be prepared before we go into the Anywhere product itself, but predominantly we're looking at the Anywhere product. So I'm Ken Good. I'll be hosting the session if you haven't gathered that already. And this is just a brief agenda. It looks like a lot of things. I've actually gone overboard on Tuesday's PowerPoint. If you were here on Tuesday, I had 5 slides. I think I've got 6, possibly 7 slides today. I ran out of fingers in one hand to count, so I need to go back and look at that. But in essence, we're just going to have a quick look at the product family, the lineup, and the positioning of where Anywhere is and why we're looking at working in the not in isolation, as I see the title says, but how we're collaborating with others. I'm then going to just talk briefly about what we have to do to prepare the model in Solibri Office, and then we'll go through the whole process of what it is we can actually do with a model that's come from an existing Office SMC file. And then there's a few little bits at the end just to talk about as well. So let me just jump into the next slide. So in terms of the product family lineup, we have 4 products that make up the Solibri software family. Today we are talking about Solibri Anywhere, and you can see there's a bunch of features and things in here. I'd see a couple of familiar names, so some of you were possibly at the session that we ran on Tuesday, which was looking just at the Anywhere product working on its own. Today's session, what we're starting to talk about is how we involve or how we work with the data that comes from the other parts of the product family. So when we start to go into Site and we go into Office and Enterprise, we start to talk about rules, about classifications, about information takeoffs, and there's a lot of data that can exist in these models, and we want to see how we can harness and use that data in the free product. So there may be a couple of reasons to use a free product. It may be you're an external party working on a project where somebody else is producing the SMC files and doing the checks, creating the information takeoffs, etc. Or it may be that you're working in a larger company and there's just not any licenses of the Office product available, so you're having to use Anywhere. There's many different scenarios that you'd find yourself in Anywhere, but hopefully we can show how you can use that and include that. We would recommend any company with either Site, Office or Enterprise licenses would recommend that you do have Anywhere available to all the users so that they can still be included to collaborate on the projects, but also you can make that choice at startup to start and take a license or just use the free version. Because if you're only doing some review, that type of thing, then you don't need to take up a full license and leave that available for other people. So let's just skip on and look at the next bit here, which is just what we need to do to prepare the model for sharing. So the very first thing we'd recommend, if you're going to be sending this externally, if you're not keeping it in-house, then you save a copy of the SMC file, and that's the one that's going to be distributed. We then need to think about the resources we're going to include. So the first thing to think of is classifications. So if classifications, if you use those to visualize the model or to use them for your information takeoffs or your rule sets, you need to make sure those are loaded in the project. If they're not loaded, then Anywhere can't load its own. So if they're not in the file, they're not available. Likewise, if you don't want them to be available, then remove them. Same's true for information takeoff. You have to load the information takeoffs into the model in the first place. But the really, really crucial thing is we have a pull down in the ITO table, and that option in there is the take off all ITOs, and what that does is calculate however many you've got loaded. If you don't calculate them before you save the file, they don't go. There's just a blank table appears at the other end. So it is important that you do the takeoff. We then talk about checking and about the rule sets, and there's 2 parts to this. So if you want to share the information and you want people to see the rules, then again, you have to load the rule sets, you have to check the model, and then really you want to process all of the results, or at least make a start on it and do as much as you can. But the crucial bit here is if you don't want the way that you've written your rules to be available to anybody else. If you don't want to show them to any external parties, then what you must do is remove those rule sets from this copy of the model. That will remove the link to the results and any links in the presentations, etc. So you need to use BCF to go backwards and forwards. But it is a way of protecting your intellectual property effectively. So it is important that, as I say, if you don't want it, right click on the rule set, remove rule sets, and that just takes them out of the copy. Don't do that in your live copy, obviously, because that's just not good. Security is another aspect. We can set the security type. We've got a couple of different options. So if you're going to use security, you have to set a master password. That's the one that you own, you control, and that allows you into the file to do pretty much whatever you like with it. But you then have the option to set an open password, so just to restrict who can open the file. If you only give the password to whoever it is, then they're the only ones that can open it. If they can open, they can't necessarily do too much more with the file. They're not going to be able to do too much in the Anywhere product. That's more for the commercial product. But something that's used fairly extensively is the expiry date. So you can issue a file, but you can issue it with confidence that it's not going to be in circulation for the next 18 months and causing you grief. So you would just set an expiry date, and that's it. The only way to open the file after that's expired is with the master password. So again, you're in control of that part of it. So the only other part is a fairly crucial one, and that's just a quick trip to settings, 3D, and then what we do is we go into the performance tab, and we always recommend that every single workstation has this option here switched off, the save 3D representations with model. It's a legacy setting and it can bloat the file size. If you ever look at an IFC file and the size of the IFC, and then when it's saved as an SMC, we do a massive amount of compression on the data that's in there. The original IFC is untouched. We're not changing that in any way. But this 3D representations does some sort of, one of the techie guys tried to explain it to me. I have no idea what he was talking about. It does magic. But basically, it's an old legacy setting, so we now switch it off, and that reduces the file sizes quite substantially. So we recommend that that's set for all users across Solibri. So the points here with a little red exclamation mark at the beginning. These are the important ones, the steps that you have to do before we go anywhere else. So in terms of collaborating with others, what we're going to be looking at today is a Solibri project, and this project is a mix of different types of Solibri that's been used so far. So we've got some Office, we've got some site licenses, and then we've got a whole bunch of Anywhere licenses where different people have been working on the project. So in the first stage, I, as myself, produced a model in Solibri Office. I did some checks, created some ITOs, did a bit of work on it, and now I've shared that SMC file. So I need somebody else to work on it, and I'm going to use my good colleague, Bob the cat, and Bob's going to use an Anywhere license to open up that existing model and do some work on it and see what can be done. So let me just jump out to Solibri, where Bob is waiting. You'll see the reason for the name in a minute. It's when we create any issues, they attribute them back to whoever signed in and whatever the reporting identity is. So that will come into play. There's a slight change just in the last couple of days. We've switched on this new panel within the recent area, and that links out to a web page effectively that allows you to go and see some of the latest news. So just yesterday, in fact, the very latest 9.10.8 update was released. So there's a bit of information here. You can read more, and that will link off to the web and tell you all about that. So I'll leave you to do that. You'll see that yourself when you open up Solibri in the future. Back in the recent area, this is the file that I created on Tuesday. Today, this is the model that was created in Solibri Office by Ken, and I now have to think of myself as Bob. And I'm going to just open this one up and then resume or pick up what can actually be done with the model so far. So all of the things we looked at the other day, the navigation is the same. We're still in Solibri Anywhere. So if you weren't at that session, we have basic controls like zoom and pan. Straight off, I'm using a regular Logitech 3-button wheel mouse here. I don't particularly get on with the very expensive Apple mouse that's also sitting, and it's the whole 2 fingers, 3 fingers. I like a nice wheel that I can zoom and pan, and it's just nice and simple and mechanical, and it works. We can also spin around the model. The stuff I showed the other day as well was the fact that we can come in here, so we have a physical switch that we can go between pan and spin. These are controlled by the left mouse click. So the only time that I actually switch between these two is if I'm stuck on a train or somewhere that I've got very little desk space and literally don't have space for a mouse and I'm using a trackpad. Walk mode, we tend not to use that as an old legacy setting that people that have used Solibri for years and years still use, but today we tend to use game mode, which means we can come in here and we can run around the building. We can go down. And I'm struggling a little bit because for whatever reason, when I use, it's bizarre, when I use go to meeting, my cursor should be locked into 3D and it shouldn't be visible. But for whatever reason, when GoToMeeting broadcasts, the cursor is actually visible outside the 3D window, so I can only move so far. But however, with this, if I walk forwards, you'll see the doorways become transparent to show that the doors that you can actually go through. We can step down here. You'll see there's another door there we can go into. And if I actually just click escape to come out of there, we can look at the navigation map. And if we make it a little bit larger and we zoom in on it, then what we'll actually see, we've got a lobby. I would need to actually go inside the room. So let's just zoom in here. Eventually, if I get far enough in here, I need to make this quite a bit bigger. I can see that I'm in Office 110. So if I go to ground floor here and jump up to the first floor, you'll see this changes and it updates to Office 215. If we just pan across the building in the background, then you'll see it updates. So I haven't moved the map, but eventually over here, we're in Office 209. So we get an update, so we get an indication of where we actually are inside the building. The other thing we can do is we can switch on these things called footprints, and they give me the ability to, if I just spin the model, so if I press 2 as the shortcut, spin around here, I've come completely outside the building. What I was trying to do is you can see through the window, the name of the office is actually printed on the floor there. So we can find our way around a fairly large building by using these footprints, using the different features to get around and see what's what. So I just had a message. Somebody can't hear. Can everybody else hear okay? I take it, actually that message is a few minutes old, so yeah. Okay, cool. Right, so let's drop back to some sort of default view over here. So this model is made up of our structural, our ventilation, and our architectural building. We can still use all the controls in Anywhere, where I can use the selection basket. So what I've done there is isolated now just the architectural model. I can then do things like, say, hide the spaces. I could also switch the footprints off just to clean up the whole thing a little bit. Hide the spaces again. We can use the model tree to drop down into different parts of the model here. So I could go to the ground floor and say, show me all of the ground floor walls. We can do that sort of thing. We can change the hierarchy. So I can now just say, well, in fact, give me all of the walls. And that's now every single wall across all of the disciplines, all of the models that are loaded into Solibri. Alternatively, we can expand that down. And once we actually know our way around the building, we start to recognize what these different things here, these are the type names, and what that allows me to do is say, well, these are all the external architectural walls, so we can select those and we can visualize them and see what's actually happening with them. We can also pick, if I press 5, which is a shortcut for info, and all that's doing is these numbers are just changing between these different options here. So info, if I pick on a wall, we get all sorts of information about the wall. I'm using a Mac today. The interface is different to Windows because Windows and Mac are different. But the only significant difference in Solibri really is this part of the interface here, where on Windows, you have a bunch of tabs that stack. On a Mac, then you have a pull-out list at the end, and you can use these arrows to jump between the different tabs in that way. So if I was to look at something like quantities, we can then start to see some of the information that's available for this particular wall. If I go for another wall, we can see that sort of thing there. We can also see things like relations. So the relationship of the nearest spaces that are bounded by this wall. So this wall bounds the couple of toilets, a conference space, and a security space as well. So these are the rooms behind here. There's also further options like, what am I looking for? There should be it's not containment. Yeah, it's a void. I'm in the wrong place. I'm looking at. So effectively, this wall has a bunch of voids in it, which means that they have a relationship back to an opening. And if I double click in the opening, it goes and highlights that opening. And that opening also has a relationship to the window that fills it. So Solibri is able to determine these relationships, and they come into play when we start to look at things, particularly like Kobe in the Office product. They come into play for how we manipulate the maintainable assets within a project. We need to know where they are and how to find them and everything else. So there's a whole load of controls that we can use there to get around the building and see what we have to do with it. We still have all the options as well, such as if I drop this back to regular view and go to here, we can go to our sectioning tool, we can grab a section on the top of the building, and we can just push and pull that through the building to then look in on a particular area and start to do whatever we need to do with it. If I press T to turn that off, we might be interested in the content of the rooms, and we might be interested in, I don't know, the routes between some of these different spaces. There's a whole variety of things that people would be interested in, so you can use that in different ways. There's a question come up that is about PDFs. So PDFs, we do actually have the option to insert PDFs into the model. We can do that in the Anywhere product. We literally just go to add models, but actually what we're looking at is we have the option here to bring in a PDF. So effectively what you can do is place a PDF underneath your model and then reference that to look at visually between the IFC model and the PDF that sits behind it as well. So coming back to this, let me just reset all of this here, and we'll start to look at what we can actually do in terms of the data that's come from the Office product. So let's make that a little bit smaller. There we go. So this is all standard Solibri Anywhere stuff, but now that we have an SMC file that came from Solibri Office and I haven't removed the rule sets, then if we go to the checking layout, we can see that the layout here is pretty much, it's not identical, but it's 90% similar to the Office layout. The only difference is you don't have the buttons that allow you to do the actual checks. However, what you can see is the structure of the rule sets, and we can start to go through them, and these have all passed. The info at the bottom will tell us the information about what the rule is checking. And if we keep going through here and down to some of these ones where I've started to process them. So the first set of checks is that the wall dimensions should be sensible. And the first rule that has an actual issue, which is this triangle here, that would originally have been a yellow triangle because it was a low severity issue. but because it's now gone grey, that means it's one that I've looked at and I've made a decision on. And effectively what it means is if we come down to the results and expand these down, we see we have a cross. So this is a decision that I've made and I've placed onto this here. And then it tells me what the problem is. So it's a wall component's got the wrong value. The actual value height is 310, and this rule is looking for all walls to be more than 500 mil. So there is a slide associated with that. We can go there and double click. And if we get the mouse to work. Why is my mouse not clicking? Come on, double click. You can see the preview of it there. I can't get it to actually open right now. I don't know why. But if we carry on through the rest of these, you can see that the rule sets are there. You can see the results. It's left open and transparent so that as an Anywhere user, you've got the ability to go through here and review what decisions have been made, and you've then got a further option in a second where we can go and comment further on these things. So I suppose that part of it is fairly, it just gives you a list of everything that's there. The next part is where we go to communication, which is when we can actually start to properly collaborate on what's actually been done already in the project. So this particular project, I've set up a whole bunch of presentations. So these checks are effectively the 3 rule sets, which are part of checking here. So if I was to minimize that and that, you can see we've got BIM validation architectural, general space, and intersections between architectural components. And in here, we've got the space checks, the BIM validation architectural, and then architectural intersection checks. So there's different ways we can do this. We could actually grab all 3 of the presentations, and that would place them all in the issue sorter here. And we could actually go through them. That also changes the issues if you want to work with them in a more methodical way, I suppose, is if I take the general space checks. Right now, this is ordered by the responsibilities, so I can quite easily see these are the 2 that are structural, so I might be interested in taking them further and doing something more with them. So we can organise them that way. Or what we could do, if I grab this biggest one here, it's got 17 items in it. If I take the modification date and pull that to position number 1 in the table, then what that does is reorder the table either alphabetically, reverse alphabetically, but latest or newest to oldest, oldest to newest. So we could do Z to A is then going to show the oldest items first, and it might be that I want to start reviewing what was first created. But another way to do it is just visually using the issue sorter. I might just have a scroll through here and think, oh, I like that red one. We'll take a look at that one. And what I can then see is the issue details. So this part here is the slide and the information that's created from, well, it's that little tab. I would need to scroll through and find it. It's somewhere in here. Not that one. It's components above. I'll do that one there, for example. So column length. So if we come into the results, this area here is directly, whoops, linked into here. So we've now got this issue visible on screen because I selected it elsewhere. So what we can do is we can review what's here. We can grab any images that are associated with it. And what we'll see is that the comments that are already on these, so if I pick a different one so it resets, you see this comment was made by me, Solibri UK, yesterday, in fact, the 27th. So this was part of what I did a few days ago when I was setting it up. And we've got the description and everything else in there. It might be that I want to add some more comments. So my initials now are BLC for Bob the Cat. And I can say, some sort of other comment. As I put that comment in, that automatically tags the fact that all my user details are in there. It will be dated, it'll be time-stamped, so there is a record of what's actually going on with it. Another way to view these entirely, if I want to just skip through them and see what's going on, is I can switch this into presentation mode. And then what I can do is jump back to the beginning of the list, and there's item number 1. So if I decide that actually this is not an issue, we can do that, add it as a comment, and then we can actually change the status in here. So we can say that that is resolved or it's closed, and we can add further people in here if we want. I could tag myself on it. We could add Bob if we need to do that sort of thing, so that we're starting to build up a record of what's actually been done there. And then in here, literally all we start to do then is just skip through, review what the comments are, decide to add any more comments if we need to. If we get to a part such as this one here, this has 2 images already part of that issue, but if I decide I want a third angle from, I don't know, over here for some reason, then what I can do is bring that around to where it needs to be, and then I can just add another slide, and on that slide I'll say seem to be missing spaces today. There we go. So we can add that in as well. If I switch out of presentation mode and back to normal, what we'd actually see is any comments and things. As I go to number 1, there's a number 3 here, and there's a box around the 3 just to show that there are comments relating to that particular slide. So when we go to that, we can still see it, but we're able to get into them and review and see what's going on in there. So in terms of processing these, it is just a case of going through and adding your own comments, your own markups. If you want to use the markup tools, then we can use markup here, and we can do things like just put a cloud around the top of the columns, whatever that happens to be. If I then refresh that view, that links the image onto that as well. Deselect it first and then refresh it. We can do that sort of thing. We can go and add dimensions if we want. Let's see what we've got. There's, in fact, it's intersections here. When we come to this, it might be that we want to put a dimension across there to see whatever's going on. So we go to our dimension tool, and just from there to there, where's the end of that wall? There it is. Because it's inside, it's hard to find. You are there, I know you're there. Go for that middle bit, that'll do. So we can put a dimension on, and there's actually another new thing in this particular version. One of the things that you may have remembered from the past, I'm going completely aside here, but our dimensions now actually have the option to display on top. So even although this dimension is inside that room, it displays the dimension through all the other components, so that it's always readable because it's always on top of what's there. It doesn't disappear into a wall or anything else like that. So that was a bit of a sidetrack. Let's refresh this. So we carry on through. I've broken these down into different ways. So I've got some ITOs, I've got some work in progress where I can start to add my own issues. So if there's something that I spot along the way, like this door, for example, I'd like it to be wider or deeper or something, we can find this. That's exactly a meter, which is quite handy. But what I can do is create a new issue in here, and then I can add my own particular details. So I really can't type today. Door width. So some sort of description, give it as much information as possible. We can say this is an open issue, maybe not an error, maybe it's just for information. We can say the responsibility is the architectural team, Bob's also part of it as well, and maybe we need to consult structures because we're increasing an opening, so the implications have to be considered there. So we can add issues on the fly if we spot things. There are issues over here which they are reported elsewhere, but there's a particular issue here where there's no opening created in the structural model for this particular window. So we can go and, if we spot that and it's not been picked up elsewhere in the rules, or we want to just double check and make sure it is recorded, then we can capture that. We can say that's certainly a structural issue. Ken was part of it. The architectural team need to be aware that they're not going to be able to see through their window. And again, give that a description. There's some of these fields here that I'm not using, so the stage, the due date, and the priority. These are only supported by BCF 2.1, and depending on the format that we would use for BCF collaboration, there's no point using it if we're only going to use BCF2 because these fields would just drop out and not actually be used. So one of the first priorities when you're going to be collaborating with others is just to work out what you're going to use and what is supported so that you don't spend time in things that, as I say, drop off the bottom of the list and don't get used again. But essentially, if you are going to be working with Solibri Anywhere and you're going to be working with projects that come from Office, I would say that most of your time is going to be spent in this communication area where you're reviewing information that's already come through from elsewhere. You can rejig the screen if you want. If you want more space, we can shrink that down so that you've just got one stack of images at the side here. That'll give you a little bit more space on the 3D view so that you can see what's going on in there. We could take this down further. If you've got dual screens, then you can start to move this onto another screen. So again, you get more space again, but it's up to you to configure that and find what you're happy with, just to pull things around to where you need them to be. So I probably want that about there because it's quite handy to have the two stacks. You can as well, because I'm using GoToWebinar, I've reduced the resolution to 1920 by 1080, but I'm actually using a 4K display that normally goes to about 3K. It doesn't 4K, I can't see the thing, but it's normally a good bit bigger, so you can actually make these images a good bit larger, which that's just getting ridiculous, but we can play around with that as much as you need to give you more control. In terms of the rest of the information that transfers across from Office, the other part is the whole information takeoff side. And if we come in here, this allows me to also see the classification area. So classifications are used in part to visualize the model in different ways. We can change the content that's displayed, we can change the appearance of what's displayed, but it's also used as a feeder into information takeoffs and rule sets. So they're really quite a crucial part to the way Solibri works. If I was to pick in one of these classifications, what you'll see is that the appearance of the model changes quite dramatically in this case. If I go for federated model alignment, for example, what this one does is effectively just paint the different parts of the model in different ways. So if I was to use this other new feature here and just isolate the first floor, then what that does is show all the architectural model in red, all the ventilation model in turquoise, cyan, whatever you want to call it, and the structural model would be blue. So the structures is done slightly differently, that it spans all the floors. But we can actually pick up these individual parts of the model and visualize them really quite quickly. So these are a great way of getting in and isolating parts of the model to go and look at. We also have things like, we've got this one here, the white model, which just paints everything white. So if you make the background black, you get quite nice visual looking models, if you like that sort of thing. You can still do your sections. So we can just take a section, we can slice that through there. We could alternatively, if we clear that, just reset that one so it's back on and say, let's have just the ground floor. Then we can see the ground floor in here. what else can we do with it? If we go for building elements general, for example, then this allows me to see the way the model's actually been organized in Office, and part of that's in preparation for pushing into rule sets and into information takeoffs. So this is really quite a nice way. If you remember in the model tree here earlier on, I was able to go in here, find the walls, isolate the external walls. Well, actually what we have is, rather than me working that out, in the information takeoff, we have a classification that shows, what is it? There it is, external walls. That also then breaks down, here's our load-bearing walls, and here's our partition walls. So we can actually add additional information to the model. So as standard, we just have a bunch of internal walls, but we're actually able to use the rules behind the classifications to narrow down and break out and define the fact that these are load-bearing walls. So this is the stair core, the elevator core, and we're able to pick that out and isolate it to use if we need to. So these really are a crucial part of Solibri in the way that we actually manage models and everything else. The other part of information takeoff is obviously the information takeoff, and just exactly like Solibri Office, we have the same table. The only difference is we don't have the options to load and to calculate and do what we need to do in terms of defining and manipulating what's in here. We don't have the reporting capability. But if I was to look at building element quantities, for example, this table then lists the building element types, the type names, the net area, the length, and the volume. And this can be defined in whatever way you want. So there's some other examples here, like spaces, just gives an overall, there's all the ground floor spaces. We can see the names of them, the total area and the average area, and then the actual count of them as well. You can see that I'm actually able to, I'm just using the up and down arrow, I'm able to go around through these, and we can isolate individually, or we can do a selection with the mouse, and we can pick up different parts of them so we can get information from there. The other thing we can do is this table, although we can't do any calculations or report it or anything like that, what we can do is grab a row, grab a couple of rows, parts of them, whatever, and I can copy that and then go drop it into Word or Excel or anything like that. So we can copy paste if we need to grab something out of there to put into a report or an email or Skype or whatever it happens to be. So let's just not save that. There's other ones that start to get a little bit more detailed. So I think it's this one here. So visualization of components. So if I was to take a space, we have the men's room here, and if I actually select all of these rows down to here, then what that does is visualize all of the components related to that particular space. And if I right click on the space and make it transparent, then you can see inside. So you can see the components inside, you can see the components above, you've got the ceilings. The walls are not shown because that would hide too much other stuff, but we're able to get some really pretty detailed information about relations between spaces and components and other bits and pieces from there. Or it might be we're just looking for raw data, and maybe what we're looking for is just structural quantities. So these are all the columns. Let's just fit that in the window. So these are all the columns. We've got, well, they don't have areas, but we've got the length, the bottom area, the surface area effectively, the height, the volume, and the count. So there'll be slight differences here because length is a variable that comes into play when we're dealing with walls, but heights for walls and I can't remember what's what. There's slight variations. So columns have lengths, but walls have heights, or vice versa. So you might see there's doubled up columns in here just to deal with the way that IFC manipulates the information to do with the different parts of the model itself. But effectively, that's our information takeoff. And that's how we're able to get around and manipulate and interrogate what's in here. So I think that's most things that we can actually do with the model. What I'm just trying to get across is the fact that there is still a lot you can do in the Anywhere product when the model's been processed properly. in Office. So you can still continue to come in here, communicate, add your own comments and things. We can then just save this model and send it back. Or what we can do from BCF is we've got this little twirly button. I don't actually know what you call that. It's the synchronization button, but I don't know what you call the symbol. And what you can do with it is you can synchronize that to one of our online servers. So let's cancel that. And if we go to settings, BCF connector, we can actually add connections to additional servers. So there's 5 providers that we work with: BIMCollab, Trimble, BIMSync, BIMTrack, and Aconex. And as long as you have an account and a project and you have access rights to that, then what you can do is to report these issues back, you can either send them directly through the cloud, you can go and physically report and create a BCF file and send them that way, or if you're working on the master SMC file, then you just simply save the file and off it goes back that way. So there's a whole load of things that we can do there. But what I'll do is I'm conscious of the time as well, so let me just jump back to the PowerPoint just to round that off, and then I can see there's another couple of questions come in. I'll come back to those shortly. So hopefully that's shown a little bit about how we can take something that started here and put it into the Anywhere product, and different people can collaborate on the same project. In terms of what to do next with Solibri, if you're new to Solibri, and in fact, I forgot to put the poll on, so let's just have a quick 30 seconds to ask what you use at the moment, if you are using it at all. Okay, so the vast majority right now, people are using Office. So I suppose what I should have done was ask a follow-up question, which is, are you using Anywhere as well as Office? It would take too long to set that one up. I should have put Anywhere on as well as Office. Let me just show the results. So yes, 79% of you are using Office, 13% Anywhere, and a few of you have not yet started. So there's 2 parts to Anywhere. So if you are already using Office, then, sorry, I'm trying to get rid of that. Go away. There we go. Back to my screen, thank you. So yeah, if you're already using Office, then Anywhere here, as you can see, can be picked up and still be used in conjunction with what you've already done. If you're using Anywhere on its own, then if you're provided the information, you can also pick it up. But if you're new to the software, or you need to find out any more about particular bits of it, then I'd strongly recommend you go and take a look at solibri.com, and it's Learn is the whole page that goes into the learning side of the system. I do have it open in Firefox here, so you can come in here and you can either browse through it, or you can go and search for a particular thing. So if I search for ITO, for example, then we've got an overview of information takeoff and the various different reports that can be produced. But there's also some other stuff as well, like there's tips and tricks, there's training materials. If we go to that, this actually links out to this playlist, which is even more of me boring you to death, but it's 10 little short movies. I think the longest one, there you go, 746 on the user interface, but this playlist goes through all of the tools to do with navigation, all of the tools to do with component handling. So transparency, hide, we haven't even looked at them here, but sectioning, the info tool, dimension and markup, and the selection basket. So there's a whole load of stuff in there that's well worth going and taking a look at, just to get a feel for what we can actually do with the system. So let me just go back into PowerPoint. Please go back into PowerPoint. I'll do it that way. So yeah, that's kind of next steps for going and taking a look at what's what in there. But beyond that, that is the end of the presentation. Thanks for paying attention and your time. And if you have any questions, I can see there's a couple of questions here, but if you've got any other questions, feel free to stick them into the question area and they'll pop up and I'll look at them if I feel like it. If they're difficult, I might not. So there's a couple already in here. Does Solibri read DWG as well? Yes, Solibri Anywhere doesn't, but Solibri Office does. However, I don't know of anybody really commercially using DWG files as a basis for any of the checks and things they do. There's a lot of work goes into reclassifying and making sure that those DWGs are in a kind of, not a format, but there's not a lot of data in them, so it takes a lot of work to make them into something more useful. And even then, because there's not a lot of data, their use is fairly limited. So technically we can read it, you could use it as a reference, but there's not a lot else. Okay, there was a question as well about spaces and volumes. Yeah, we can work out all of that stuff. The ITOs are fairly simple ones just to show what's what in there. And let me just, that's a long question. Suppose master SMCs receives multiple BCF that are exported from anywhere. BCF combine them together. Okay, so I think what this is saying is, correct me if I'm wrong, let me go back to this here. So what I think has been said here is if you are in Solibri Office and you receive BCF files from lots of different parties using the other products, what happens? So we don't read them simultaneously, but as part of BCF, the GUIDs to the actual issues themselves are tracked. So if the original model is authored from Office and it goes out and the issues are updated in lots of different BCF files, when it comes back together, BCF retains the links to the original issues. So if there was a whole bunch of comments on I had the balcony wall was one of the things I had, the two little red walls at a right angle, they would all come back and the comments would automatically be added into that system. And again, things like the date stamp and the timestamps, those are all important. So it will log them into the correct place within the communication area. So you would see that. Okay, what else have we got? Actually, there was a follow-up to that. Is if anywhere could be a way to do simultaneous checking. What you could do is you could save multiple copies of the SMC file and distribute them to various parties, and then they could return the responses and be updated inside one master SMC file. I don't know if that answers the question, but it is one way to do it. What else have we got? Will there be a session of Kobe on Kobe out of Solibri? There is stuff in progress, not really just a session on this, but more of an overview video of the processes, the things that have to be done to get Kobe information into Solibri and then out in the form of a report. So yeah, there's stuff happening there. Keep an eye on the Learn page because that's where any of these updates will go. It is something that's in progress, but we're a little while off finishing that just yet. Change the rule set by checking Solibri Anywhere. No, you're not able to. Although you can view the rule sets, you can't do anything with them. You can't check. You can't modify. You will see as well. It did actually say in Solibri here, if I was to go to information takeoff, you'll see that these classifications are locked, and normally I would do right click settings, or there's a settings button here. I don't have access to those. All I can see is the actual what do you call it, the result of them. That's all I can see. There's a guide for Revit users to produce good quality IFC files. Maybe. There is stuff on Learn. If you search Revit IFC, there is an article that explains what's what. We are actually also in the process of speaking to a couple of consultants to put together a further Solibri ASSIST session that is specifically talking about what has to be done to prepare Revit to export an IFC. We're going to do the same for ArchiCAD and a few other products as well. Tekla would be another one. So that is also in progress, but we're probably looking at, where are we just now? Coming into May. It's probably June time, maybe, before we'll be doing that. But keep an eye out for any updates. It will be another Solibri ASSIST session. There's a few things we've got to get in place because we need some external consultant to actually do the Revit part of it, because we are Solibri, we're the vendor, so we can't really, although we know a fair bit about what has to be done, it really needs to be somebody with the proper accreditation that can can make these comments. So yes, there's more of that to come. Okay. I think that was them. So any other questions? Okay, there's another one here. Evolution input or consultant's BCF file. Sorry, I'm reading out loud, so this is very interesting for you, I'm sure. Okay, so there's a question here about it's a BCF that doesn't update in Solibri. Really, something like that, if you drop an email to support@solibri.com, that is something we need to look at from a technical point of view, because if the BCF file is linked to our project, then yeah, it should update inside Solibri. So there's something not quite right in there, whether it's the version that's been used to create the BCF, but it all depends if we're talking BCF or if we're talking BCF connector, or a whole variety of other things. But certainly that is something we can look at from a technical point of view through the support mechanism. Right, that was another couple of questions. I haven't scrolled. Can Solibri do sequencing? Kind of. I'll leave it there. Not as such, but we do actually have the option within classifications to use dates as the classification value. So we then have the ability to filter a date range so that we can say on the, where are we today? 30th of April, this is the status of the project. It does need quite a bit of work to be done to prepare the model to make sure dates are in place. It's not sequencing as such, but it does allow us to visualize the way the model's progressing, or the way the model's going to be put together. So there is a certain amount we can do. Okay. Can I hide elements I've found via the search function? Yeah. Anything can be hidden. I'm not quite sure of what the workflow is, or what the reason is behind it. But if I was to do and I'm assuming you mean search here. So if I was to search for, if I just do EW, that's all the external walls, then on anything, you can actually come in here and you can say hide, and you can start to click on components and hide them. So we can do that sort of thing. There's also the good old, if anybody used AutoCAD in the past, or recently, AutoCAD, ArchiCAD, most tools actually have got this ability to do a window selection or a crossing window. So if I do a window, that's going to hide everything fully inside that blue window. So I can hide that sort of thing there. So we can do that sort of thing, but I don't know if that answers the question. We can certainly hide things that way. What I could then do is, if I go to select, I could put everything into the selection basket, which means we can then use these tools to say, well, there's everything else transparent, but the selection remains blue. Or if I was to do a reset, then the selection remains in its original color, or you could switch it back just to the selection. And all of this, of course, if you go to communication, and if this is a particular thing that you're working on, then I would take that into my work in progress and add that as a new issue with a detailed title and description as always. And what that means is that at any point I can, whatever I do here, to completely change, or if I go for one of these things here, like this visualization, completely change the appearance. But if I go back to communication and just click away and click back, then I can actually restore this view at any time if I need to bring it back for whatever reason. So I hope that answers. I don't really know if that's the workflow you're looking for, but hopefully that answers the question for you. Okay. So I think that's all the questions ticked off, hopefully. There will be a follow-up email that will have a link to the recording and a few other bits and pieces, other resources you can use, but hopefully that's given you an overview of how we can use Anywhere in conjunction with an office or a site, a model that's been prepared in advance. So I'll probably wrap things up now, but thanks for your time and attention. And if you get any issues, just drop us an email and we can follow up.